The world operates on an ancient, unyielding law. It breaks anything that refuses to bend. You have likely felt it. Those moments when life piles so much weight onto your shoulders that you can almost hear the sound of your own spirit cracking under the pressure. It might have been the day you were unexpectedly fired, the night you lost someone who was your entire world, or that quiet, devastating moment when you looked in the mirror and saw a person who had simply given up. In these moments of peak suffering, the most common human reflex is to complain. We cry out to the heavens demanding to know, why me? We tell anyone who will listen that life is unfair. But have you ever paused to ask what complaining actually achieves? Do tears fill an empty bank account? Does bitterness bring back what was lost? The answer is a cold, hard no. Stoicism, the philosophy practiced by the greatest titans of the Roman Empire, teaches us that complaining is not just useless, it is a form of spiritual suicide. When you complain, you signal to the universe that you are a victim, that your circumstances are bigger than your soul, and that you are no longer the master of your own destiny. To understand how to move beyond this, we must look at the life of the man who mastered the art of the inner fortress, Marcus Aurelius. Imagine a man who held the keys to the known world, a Roman emperor whose whisper could launch 1,000 ships. He could have lived in unparalleled luxury, yet his life was a relentless sequence of tragedies and hardships. He spent his nights in damp, freezing military tents on the edges of the empire rather than in the warmth of a palace. He buried 8 of his 13 children, watched his most trusted general betray him, and led his people through a plague that left the streets of Rome lined with corpses. If any human being had a right to complain, it was Marcus. Yet he chose to reach for his journal instead of his anger. He wrote to himself, "The cosmos is change, life is what our thoughts make of it." He realized that the universe is not cruel, it is simply indifferent. Stoicism's first great lesson is that life isn't unfair. Life is just life. It moves according to its own nature, and to complain about it is as futile as a traveler screaming at a storm. The storm does not hear you and the rain does not stop. You only become colder and more exhausted by your own rage. A fundamental cause of our failure is the fairness fallacy. Most of us were raised on stories where the hero is rewarded for being good and the villain is punished for being bad. When life breaks our plans, we feel betrayed because we expect a moral return on our investment of being a good person. However, the Stoic looks at the world with a naked eye. They understand that a storm does not apologize to the house it destroys, and the universe does not owe us a smooth path. Epictetus, a slave who rose to become one of the most influential philosophers in history, famously stated that people are not disturbed by things, but by the view they take of them. When your car is totaled, the only objective fact is that the metal is twisted. The suffering comes from the labels you attach to it. This is a disaster. My luck is terrible, or I'll never recover. Stoicism offers an instant fix by teaching you to strip away these emotional labels. If you lose your job, that is a fact you can act upon. If you tell yourself your life is over, that is a complaint that paralyzes you. One is a stepping stone, the other is a gravestone. The entire architecture of Stoic thought rests upon the dichotomy of control. Marcus Aurelius believed that every event in the universe is divided into 2 categories, things within our power and things outside of it. We fail and we complain because 99% of our energy is focused on the external category, the economy, the weather, the opinions of our neighbors, or the mistakes of our past. When life tries to break you, the Stoic asks one clarifying question: is this something I can change right now? If the answer is no, then shedding a single tear over it is a waste of your divine spark. Marcus did not obsess over whether he would win the war, because victory involved variables beyond his reach. He focused only on whether he was fighting with honor and doing his duty. When you stop worrying about the result and focus entirely on your input, you become unbreakable. No one can take away your effort, your integrity, or your will. By narrowing your focus to the small circle of your own control, you build a wall around your mind that no external tragedy can breach. Finally, we encounter the most difficult yet transformative concept: Amor Fati, or the love of fate. This is not mere resignation. It is a passionate embrace of whatever happens. It is the ability to look at a devastating setback and say, I wanted this to happen because it is exactly what I need to become stronger. Think of yourself as a fire. A small candle is blown out by a gust of wind, but a great conflagration consumes the wind and uses it to grow taller and hotter. The obstacles in your life are the wind. If you complain, you are the candle. If you practice Stoicism, you are the fire. A sword only becomes a masterpiece after it has been repeatedly thrust into the flame and beaten against the anvil. Complaining is the cry of the iron that fears the hammer. But the Stoic is the iron that says, strike me again, for you are only perfecting my edge. Your struggle is not meant to stop you, it is meant to forge you. The true battlefield of life is not the world around you, but the narrow space between your ears. Marcus Aurelius understood that while we cannot control the cards we are dealt, we have absolute sovereignty over how we read the hand. This is the discipline of perception. When life tries to break you, it usually starts by attacking your narrative. It whispers that your situation is hopeless or that you are defeated. But a Stoic realizes that defeat is not an objective reality, it is an interpretation. Consider the perspective of a mountain climber. To an amateur, a sheer cliff is a terrifying obstacle, a reason to complain and turn back. To a professional, that same cliff is the very reason they climbed the mountain in the first place. The cliff hasn't changed, but the perception of it makes the difference between fear and exhilaration. You are failing because you are looking at your struggles as interruptions to your life, rather than realizing that the struggle is your life. Every crisis is actually a masterclass in disguise, provided you have the eyes to see it. Marcus Aurelius often used the metaphor of a mule kicking or a dog barking to describe the behavior of difficult people and harsh circumstances. He argued that it is in the nature of a mule to kick and in the nature of a dog to bark. Therefore, to be surprised or upset when they do so is a sign of your own ignorance. When a business deal falls through or a friend betrays you, complaining is essentially a confession that you expected the world to act against its own nature. The universe is a chaotic, shifting entity governed by laws of change and entropy. By expecting it to be static, safe, and nice, you set yourself up for a psychological collapse. The Stoic fix is to view every event with a cold, clinical objectivity. Do not add, and this is terrible, to the end of your observations. If you lose money, simply state, I have less money. If someone speaks ill of you, simply state, they have spoken words. By refusing to attach emotional weight to external events, you remain upright when everyone else is being swept away by the tide of their own drama. To achieve an unbreakable spirit, you must practice the refiner's fire technique. Imagine a goldsmith throwing raw ore into a furnace. The heat is intense and the metal might seem like it is being destroyed. But the goldsmith knows that the fire is only there to burn away the impurities, leaving behind the pure gold. When life puts you in the furnace of poverty, heartbreak, or failure, your immediate instinct is to complain about the heat. But the Stoic asks, what part of me is being burned away? Usually, it is your ego, your vanity, your laziness, or your dependence on others. The fire is not your enemy, it is your purifier. Marcus Aurelius sat in his tent during the Marcomannic Wars, suffering from chronic stomach pain and the weight of a dying empire, yet he told himself to be like the emerald. No matter what happens, no matter what is said or done, the emerald must keep its color. You must decide that your character is an emerald. Let the world throw its dirt, its heat, and its pressure. Your job is simply to keep your color. One of the most powerful psychological tools in the Stoic arsenal is the objective representation. This involves breaking down the things we desire or fear into their base elements to remove their power over us. Marcus Aurelius famously described expensive Falernian wine as nothing but the juice of a bunch of grapes, and a purple imperial robe as sheep's wool dyed with the blood of a shellfish. When life tries to break you with a specific fear, say the fear of losing your social status, use this technique. What is social status? It is the temporary, fluctuating chemical reactions in the brains of people you don't even like. What is a fancy car? It is a collection of steel, glass, and rubber that is slowly returning to dust. By deconstructing the monsters in your life into their physical components, they stop looking like giants and start looking like the trivialities they are. Complaining stems from overinflating the importance of worldly things. When you realize that most of what you worry about is essentially smoke, you find it impossible to stay upset. Finally, we must address the will to persevere. There is a story of a Stoic who was told his house had burned down. He replied, "If the universe wanted me to have a house, it would not have burned. Since it burned, it means I am meant to live without it for now." This sounds extreme, but it represents the ultimate level of psychological freedom. You are breakable because you are attached to things you don't own. You don't own your house, your health, or even your breath. They are all on loan from the universe, and the universe can call back its loan at any second. Complaining is like a child crying when a toy they borrowed has to be returned. The Stoic lives with a reserved clause, always telling themselves, "I will succeed if nothing happens to prevent it." This doesn't mean they are pessimistic. It means they are prepared. By accepting the possibility of loss before it happens, you rob the breaking point of its power. You become like the ocean. You can receive 1,000 dirty rivers of misfortune, but you remain vast, deep, and blue. One of the most frequent reasons we feel broken and compelled to complain is the behavior of other people. We are social animals, and we have been conditioned to value the harmony of our tribe. However, Marcus Aurelius lived at the center of a hornet's nest of betrayal, palace intrigue, and public criticism. He realized that if your peace of mind depends on the kindness or honesty of others, you will be a lifelong slave. In his meditations, he wrote a famous morning reminder: "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." He didn't say this to be a cynic, he said it to be a strategist. You are failing because you are shocked by human nature. You complain when someone lies to you as if you expected every human to be a saint. The Stoic social shield is built on the realization that people act according to their own nature and their own perceived self-interest. To expect a dishonest person to be honest is as illogical as expecting a fig tree to produce apples. When you stop expecting the impossible from people, they lose the power to break your spirit. Complaining about the actions of others is essentially an admission that they have reached inside you and stirred your emotions. Marcus Aurelius argued that the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. If someone is rude to you and you respond with anger or complaints, you have allowed their toxicity to infect your soul. You have become a mirror of their ugliness. The Stoic response to an insult is indifference. Imagine a person standing on the shore of a vast ocean, screaming insults at the waves. Does the ocean change its tide? Does it become salty out of spite? No. The ocean remains the ocean. You must become the ocean. When someone attacks you, realize that their behavior is a symptom of their own internal disease. They are acting out of ignorance or pain. By viewing your enemies with the same detached pity you would feel for someone with a physical fever, you neutralize the impact of their words. You are not being broken by them, you are being tested by them. Every toxic person is a sparring partner provided by the universe to help you strengthen your patience and your self-control. A major psychological trap that leads to complaining is the search for approval. We often feel broken not because of the event itself, but because of what people will think of the event. We fear the loser label. Marcus Aurelius observed that we all love ourselves more than other people, yet we value their opinion more than our own. This is a profound irony. Why do you care about the judgment of people who don't even understand their own lives? If you are doing the right thing, if you are acting with integrity, then the noise of the crowd is irrelevant. A diamond does not lose its value because a blind man cannot see it. You must build a citadel within your mind where the only judge is your own conscience. When life tries to break you through public shame or social exclusion, go inside that citadel. Ask yourself, have I lost my ability to be just? Have I lost my ability to be temperate? Have I lost my courage? If the answer is no, then you have lost nothing of value. The rest is just breath and noise, as Marcus called it. Furthermore, we must address the vampire of comparison. We complain because we see others who seem to have an easier path. We see this successful person on social media and feel that life has dealt us a bad hand. But Stoicism teaches us that you never truly know what is happening in another person's soul. The man in the gold palace may be a prisoner of his own fears, and the woman with the perfect life may be drowning in anxiety. Complaining about your luck compared to others is a form of envy that rots the character from within. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that every person he met was a part of the same cosmic body. If the foot is hurt, the hand should not complain, it should help. If you are in a position of struggle, it is your role in the grand play of the universe at this moment. A great actor does not complain that they were cast as the villain or the beggar. They simply play the part to the best of their ability. Your life is your stage. Stop looking at the other actors' scripts and start mastering your own lines. The final layer of the social shield is the practice of kindness under pressure. It is easy to be a good person when everyone is cheering for you. The true test of Stoicism is how you treat people when your life is falling apart. When life tries to break you, the easiest thing to do is to become bitter and take it out on those around you. But Marcus Aurelius believed that humanity is our primary function. Even when he was dying, his concern was for his soldiers and his people. By shifting your focus from, how can I get what I want, to, how can I be useful despite my pain, you perform a psychological miracle. You transform from a victim into a leader. You stop complaining about what you aren't receiving and start focusing on what you can still give. This shift in focus is the ultimate fix for failure. A person who is focused on serving a higher purpose or helping others cannot be broken, because their source of meaning is internal and inexhaustible. You find that by mending others, you accidentally mend yourself. The most profound reason we complain is that we live under the grand delusion that our time is infinite. We act as if we have 1,000 years to waste on resentment, 1,000 years to wallow in our failures, and 1,000 years to wait for the right moment to be happy. But Stoicism brings us crashing back to reality with the practice of memento mori, the constant remembrance of death. Marcus Aurelius sat at the head of the world, but he constantly whispered to himself, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." When life tries to break you, it is often by threatening your future. But when you realize that your future was never guaranteed to begin with, the threat loses its teeth. You stop complaining about the lost years or the missed opportunities because you realize that the only thing you ever truly possessed was the present moment. Death is the great equalizer. It turns the tragedies of an emperor and the struggles of a commoner into the same quiet dust. Most of our complaints are rooted in trivialities that we have inflated into catastrophes. We lose our temper over a slow internet connection, a rude comment, or a minor financial setback. Memento mori acts as a powerful psychological filter that strips away the non-essential. Imagine you are standing on your deathbed, looking back at this very moment of struggle. Would you really spend your final breaths complaining about this specific problem? Probably not. You would realize that the problem was a tiny speck in the vast timeline of your existence. Marcus Aurelius encouraged us to look at the stars and the abyss of time that stretches behind us and before us. In the face of infinity, your failure is microscopic. By zooming out to the perspective of the cosmos, you find it almost impossible to stay angry or broken. The fix for failure is to realize that life is too short to spend even a single second in a state of internal discord. Complaining is often a byproduct of temporal myopia, the inability to see past the immediate pain. We are so focused on the sting of the present that we forget that we are mortal beings on a brief journey. Marcus Aurelius viewed life as a point in time, a fleeting flash between two eternities. He argued that since our time is so limited, the only logical way to live is with virtue in the present. If life breaks your plans today, so be it. You are still alive now. You still have the power to exercise courage now. You still have the capacity for kindness now. When you live with the awareness of death, you become urgent but calm. You are urgent because you know the clock is ticking, but you are calm because you know that as long as you have your character, you have everything you need. A man who knows he could die tonight does not waste his afternoon complaining about his luck. Furthermore, Memento Mori teaches us the art of pre-mortem thinking. We are broken by events because they surprise us. We assume our health will last forever, our relationships will never end, and our wealth is secure. When the inevitable happens, we feel betrayed by the universe. But the Stoic practices premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. They visualize the loss of everything they hold dear. This is not morbid, it is a form of psychological vaccination. By dying to your attachments before you actually die, you become invincible. If you have already accepted the possibility of losing your job in your mind, then the actual loss cannot break you. You have already done the grieving. Now you only have the doing. You stop complaining because you have already accounted for the price of being alive. The final gift of mortality is the realization of collective human fate. You are not the first person to suffer, and you will certainly not be the last. Millions of people before you have faced the exact same breaking points, poverty, illness, betrayal, and they have all passed into the same silence. Marcus Aurelius looked at the records of the great men of history and realized that they are all gone. The doctors who treated the sick, the kings who conquered nations, the philosophers who debated the stars. They are all dust. When you see yourself as part of this long line of human struggle, your individual pain feels less like a personal attack and more like a shared experience. You stop complaining because you realize you are simply playing your part in the ancient, tragic, and beautiful drama of humanity. To accept death is to finally accept life. Knowledge without action is merely a distraction. You can read the words of Marcus Aurelius for 1,000 years, but if you do not translate them into a daily ritual, you will remain just as breakable as you were before. Stoicism is not a set of beliefs, it is an athletics of the mind. Just as a weightlifter builds muscle through repetitive tension, a Stoic builds resilience through the repetitive application of logic to emotion. To stop complaining and start winning, you must establish a morning and evening fortress. Marcus Aurelius began his day by preparing his mind for war, not a war with swords, but a war with his own impulses. Your morning routine is your mental armor. Before you check your phone, before you let the noise of the world invade your peace, you must set your intentions. Ask yourself, what challenges will I face today? How will my character be tested? And which Stoic tool will I use to stay centered? By anticipating the struggle, you rob the struggle of its ability to surprise you. One of the most effective daily practices is the view from above. Throughout your day, whenever you feel the urge to complain, stop and mentally pull back. Imagine you are looking down at yourself from the ceiling, then from the clouds, then from the moon, until you see the entire earth as a tiny blue marble spinning in the void. From this height, your crisis, the traffic jam, the rude email, the missed deadline, disappears into insignificance. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly to maintain his imperial perspective. He realized that most of what we stress about is local, temporary, and trivial. When you look at your life from the perspective of the cosmos, you find it physically difficult to remain upset. The fix for your frustration is scale. By making your perspective large, you make your problems small. This isn't about ignoring your responsibilities, it's about managing your emotional investment in them. The midday practice of a Stoic is the pause of reason. In the heat of the moment, when life tries to break you, there is a tiny gap between the event and your reaction. In that gap lies your freedom. The broken person reacts instantly. Someone insults them, they get angry, they lose money, they feel despair. The Stoic trains themselves to inhabit that gap. They say to themselves, "Wait a moment, let me see what you are and what you represent. Let me test you." This is the discipline of ascent. You do not have to agree with your initial emotional impression. Just because your brain says, "This is a disaster," doesn't mean you have to believe it. By simply pausing for 10 seconds and asking, "Is this truly harmful to my character?" you prevent the break from ever happening. You realize that as long as your ability to think clearly remains intact, you have not been harmed. As the sun sets, the Stoic practices the evening review. Seneca, a fellow Stoic contemporary to Marcus's influences, described this as a trial of one's own soul. Before you sleep, go over your day in your mind. Do not judge yourself with cruelty, but with the clinical eye of a doctor. Ask, "What did I do well today? Where did I lose my temper? Why did I feel the need to complain at 2 p.m.? This is the secret to incremental mastery. You are failing because you are not tracking your mistakes. You keep falling into the same psychological traps because you don't map them out. By reviewing your day, you identify the triggers that make you feel breakable. You realize that you aren't a victim of bad luck, but a victim of bad habits. The evening review turns your failures into data, and data is the fuel for growth. Finally, the most practical daily tool is voluntary hardship. Marcus Aurelius, despite being an emperor, would occasionally sleep on the ground or eat the simplest of foods to remind himself that he could survive even if he lost his wealth. You should do the same. Take a cold shower when you want a warm one. Skip a meal. Walk when you could drive. What? Because complaining often comes from a softness of soul. We are so pampered by modern convenience that the slightest discomfort feels like an attack. By intentionally seeking out small discomforts, you build a callus on your spirit. You realize that you can be happy even when things aren't perfect. When life actually tries to break you with real hardship, you will look at it and say, "I've practiced for this. I've survived worse by choice." You stop complaining because you have become life-proof. Everything we have discussed, the discipline of perception, the social shield, and the remembrance of death, converges into a single profound psychological structure, the inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius believed that every human being possesses a spiritual fortress that no external force can penetrate unless we voluntarily open the gates. You feel broken because you believe the enemy is already inside, but the Stoic realizes that the enemy, poverty, illness, or failure, can only camp outside the walls. They can take your money, they can ruin your reputation, and they can even destroy your body, but they cannot force you to think a thought you do not want to think. They cannot force you to abandon your integrity. This is the ultimate fix for failure. Realizing that your self is located in your choice, not in your circumstances. When life tries to break you, it is merely banging on the heavy iron doors of a fortress it cannot enter. To maintain this citadel, you must master the art of acquiescence. This is the ability to accept the inevitable with a smile. We often complain because we are fighting a war against reality. We want the past to be different. We want people to be better. We want the laws of physics to change for our convenience. This resistance is what causes the soul to crack. The Stoic, however, practices a form of mental jujitsu. Instead of resisting the force of a tragedy, they use its momentum to propel themselves forward. If you lose your job, you don't fight the fact that you were fired. You accept it instantly and redirect your energy toward the next move. Marcus Aurelius famously said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This means that the break itself provides the raw material for your next success. You stop complaining because you are too busy using the debris of your old life to build a better one. The inner citadel is also protected by the discipline of desire. We are easily broken because we desire things that are fragile. If you desire the applause of the crowd, you will be broken when they boo. If you desire a specific amount of money, you will be broken by a market crash. The Stoic fix is to redirect your desire inward. Desire only what is within your control: your honesty, your courage, and your kindness. These things are unbreakable because they are self-generated. You cannot lose your courage unless you choose to throw it away. When you stop hungering for the shadows of life, fame, luxury, and ease, the world loses its leverage over you. You become a person who cannot be bribed by pleasure or intimidated by pain. This is the birth of the legend within you, a person who stands like a rock in a churning sea, where the waves break against it but the rock remains unmoved. A critical weakness in the modern mind is emotional leakage. We allow our small frustrations to leak into our big goals. We let a bad morning ruin a whole week. Within the inner citadel, there are airtight compartments. Marcus Aurelius was able to lead an empire while his body was failing and his heart was grieving because he kept his duties separate from his pains. He did not allow his physical suffering to infect his decision-making. When life tries to break you, it tries to create a chain reaction of failure. One mistake leads to guilt, guilt leads to distraction, and distraction leads to a bigger mistake. The Stoic stops the chain. They treat every moment as a fresh start. If you fail at 10 a.m., you don't complain about it at 10:01 a.m. You close that compartment and start anew. You are only ever as broken as you are in this exact millisecond. Finally, the inner citadel is fueled by self-sufficiency. Most people are like parasites of their environment. They need the sun to shine to feel happy, and they need people to be nice to feel worthy. The Stoic is solar. They generate their own light. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that a perfectly clear and quiet place exists within his own soul, and he could retreat there at any time to find peace. This is not an escape from reality, but a recharging of the spirit. When the world is screaming and life is trying to break you, you don't look for a vacation or a distraction. You look inward. You find the part of you that is ancient, calm, and untouchable. By finding your own center, you become a source of stability for everyone else. You stop complaining because you realize you are the source of your own salvation. We have reached the summit of our journey. If you have traveled through the previous volumes, you are no longer the same person who began this story. You started as a victim of circumstances, someone who felt that life was an antagonist trying to break your spirit. But through the eyes of Marcus Aurelius, you have discovered that life is not your enemy, it is your gymnasium. The failure you feared is nothing more than the weight on the barbell, and the pain you complained about is merely the sensation of your soul expanding. This final chapter is about this synthesis, bringing every Stoic tool together to complete your transformation from a person who reacts into a person who leads. The final fix for a life of failure is the integration of the whole. You must realize that your character is not something you have, but something you do. Marcus Aurelius, in his final days, did not ask for a monument of stone. He sought to be a living monument of virtue. He understood that the greatest tragedy is not death, but a life lived in a state of spiritual sleep. When you stop complaining, you wake up. You realize that every second spent in resentment was a second you were effectively dead. To be unbreakable means to accept that everything, absolutely everything, is fuel for your growth. If you are betrayed, it is a lesson in forgiveness. If you are poor, it is a lesson in resourcefulness. If you are lonely, it is a lesson in self-reliance. When you adopt this alchemist's mindset, failure becomes impossible because there is no outcome that does not benefit you. We must also address the legacy of silence. There is a profound power in the man or woman who suffers in silence. In our modern world, we are encouraged to vent and share our traumas instantly. But there is a hidden danger in this. The more you talk about your pain, the more you solidify it in your mind. By constantly complaining, you are rehearsing your own defeat. Marcus Aurelius practiced the silence of the wise. He felt the sting, but he did not let it pass his lips. There is a magnificent strength in being the person who is going through hell but continues to show up for others with a calm face and a steady hand. This is not suppression. It is mastery. It is the refusal to give your pain the satisfaction of an audience. When you stop complaining to the world starts looking to you for strength. The transition from failure to legend requires the death of the ego. Most of our breaking points are actually just bruised egos. We are upset because we didn't get the respect we thought we deserved, or we didn't achieve the status we wanted. The Stoic realizes that the ego is a ghost that haunts the inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius would look at the names of the emperors who came before him and realize they were forgotten. He knew that in 100 years, no one would remember his name. This realization didn't make him depressed. It made him free. When you realize that your reputation is just a collection of fleeting thoughts in the minds of other mortals, you stop being a slave to it. You stop complaining about being misunderstood because you no longer need to be understood by anyone but yourself. As we conclude this 10,000-word deep dive, you must take the vow of the present. Marcus Aurelius's life was a testament to the fact that greatness is found in the smallest unit of time. You don't need to fix your whole life today. You only need to fix this 1 hour. You only need to handle this one conversation without complaining. You only need to do this one task with total focus. Success is nothing more than a long chain of perfect moments. If you can stay unbroken for just 5 minutes, you have proven that you can be unbroken forever. The legend is not born in a single act of heroism. It is born in the 1,000 quiet choices to stay disciplined when you are tired, to stay kind when you are angry, and to stay silent when you want to complain. Now stand up. Look at your life not as a series of problems, but as a series of assignments given to you by the universe. You are an actor in a play written by a master playwright. Your role is difficult, yes. Your path is steep, absolutely. But you were chosen for this specific struggle because you have the capacity to endure it. Do not pray for an easier life. Pray to be a stronger person. Do not look for a way out, look for the way through. As you step back into the world, remember the words that Marcus Aurelius whispered to himself every morning. The sun shines even on the wicked, and the sea remains blue even in a storm. Be like the sun. Be like the sea. Be like the emperor. The era of complaining is over. The era of the unbreakable has begun. While the previous chapters focused on building your defenses, Volume 8 is about the offensive. It is one thing to survive a storm. It is another to learn how to use the wind to power your sails. Marcus Aurelius did not just tolerate his hardships. He looked for the utility in them. This is the stage of the Stoic alchemist. An alchemist is someone who takes a base, worthless metal and transforms it into gold. In your life, the base metal is your failure, your grief, and your physical pain. Most people look at these things and see trash. The Stoic looks at them and sees the raw material for greatness. You are failing because you are throwing away your best opportunities simply because they are wrapped in a layer of suffering. The first step in this alchemy is the reframing of the obstacle. Marcus Aurelius famously wrote that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is often misquoted as a simple motivational slogan, but it is actually a deep psychological strategy. When life tries to break you with a specific problem, let's say a lack of resources, the problem itself dictates the solution. If you have no money, you are forced to become more creative, more disciplined, and more resourceful than a person who is comfortable. The lack of money is the very thing that will build the skills required to make and keep wealth. By complaining about the lack of money, you are essentially complaining about the very training session that will make you a master. Furthermore, we must master the Stoic inversion. This is the practice of looking at a bad event and immediately listing the virtues it allows you to practice. Betrayal allows you to practice forgiveness. Physical pain allows you to practice endurance. Public insult allows you to practice humility. Extreme stress allows you to practice composure. If you are not being tested, your virtues are purely theoretical. You don't know if you are a brave person until you are faced with something terrifying. You don't know if you are a patient person until you are surrounded by idiots. Therefore, when life tries to break you, you should greet it with a grim smile. You should say, "Ah, another opportunity to train. Thank you for the equipment." You stop complaining because you realize that a world without problems is a world without growth. You wouldn't go to the gym and complain that the weights are heavy. That is why you are there. A crucial component of this volume is the transformation of anger. Marcus Aurelius dealt with more betrayal and incompetence than almost any leader in history. Yet he viewed anger as a sign of weakness, not strength. He noted that anger is often more hurtful than the things that caused it. When you complain out of anger, you are leaking energy. You are letting the person who wronged you win twice, once by their action and once by stealing your peace. The Stoic alchemist takes that heat, the fire of anger, and channelizes it into productive resolve. Instead of shouting at the person who let you down, you use that adrenaline to work an extra 3 hours on your project. You turn your spite into success. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy, but to be so successful and calm that their actions no longer matter. Finally, we must understand the continuity of the soul. Marcus Aurelius believed that the universe is a single living organism, and everything that happens to one part affects the whole. This means your struggle is not a localized accident. It is a necessary part of a much larger cosmic movement. Just as the death of a cell is necessary for the life of the body, your breaking point might be the necessary catalyst for a major shift in your family, your community, or your future self. When you see your pain as a contribution to the whole, it loses its personal sting. You stop complaining because you realize that you are a soldier in a divine army, and a soldier does not complain about the mud of the trenches when they know the war is being won. You become a person of infinite utility, finding a way to be useful even in the wreckage of your own life. By Ye Apki 10,000-word epic documentary ka grand finale hai. Ismain hum puri story ka nikit or Marcus Aurelius ki zindagi ka akri sabak shamil ki a high tak viewer video kadam kardi hayek badla hua insan Mrs. Care. Volume 10, The Final Ascent. The transformation is complete. As we reach the final horizon of this journey, we must face the ultimate truth that Marcus Aurelius realized in his dying moments. Life is not a destination to be reached, but a character to be forged. You began this story looking for a way to stop the world from breaking you, and you have ended it by realizing that you are the hammer, not the anvil. The 10,000 words we have traveled together were not just a history lesson. They were a systematic dismantling of the victim mindset. You have learned that complaining is the language of the weak, and silence is the sanctuary of the strong. The final transformation happens when you stop asking life to be easy and start demanding that you be great. The pinnacle of Stoic mastery is the unconditional yes. Most people live their lives with conditions. I will be happy if I get the promotion, or I will be calm if people treat me well. The Stoic, however, gives an unconditional yes to reality. Whether it is a sunny day or a day of mourning, whether it is a year of profit or a year of bankruptcy, the Stoic says, "This is what is, and I will make it beautiful." Marcus Aurelius, as he lay dying of the plague in a cold tent in Vindobona, did not complain about the injustice of his death. He looked at his weeping friends and said, "Why do you weep for me, and not think rather of the pestilence and the death which is common to all?" Even in his final breath he was teaching. He was showing us that the imperial mind does not break. It simply transitions from one state to another. To conclude your journey, you must accept the duty of excellence. You were not put on this earth to be a passenger. You were put here to be a creator, a protector, and a beacon of reason. Every time you choose not to complain, you are contributing to the sanity of the world. Every time you meet failure with a steady gaze, you are giving courage to everyone who watches you. Your life is now a living meditations. You no longer need to read the books of the ancient masters, because you have become the master of your own soul. The path ahead will still be steep and the winds will still howl, but they will no longer bother you. You are the inner citadel personified, a fortress of calm in a world of chaos. As the curtain falls on this narrative, remember that the great fix for failure is to never let it reach your heart. You may lose everything else, but as long as you have your prohairesis, your faculty of choice, you are undefeated. The world has tried to break you 1,000 times, and yet here you are, standing taller, thinking clearer, and breathing deeper. The ghost of Marcus Aurelius smiles upon the person you have become. You are no longer a slave to your emotions or a prisoner of your circumstances. You are a Stoic. You are an emperor of your own mind. Stand up. Dust yourself off. The world is waiting for a leader who does not complain. That leader is you.